Alrighty, everyone, welcome back to The Chase, the show that dives deep into the world of high performance alongside some of the world's most esteemed athletes, leaders, and ambitious individuals. I'm your host, Christian Dyer, and today's episode will be nothing short of epic. Our guest today really needs no introduction, but I'll give her one anyway. Please welcome the incredible Gabby Reece to the show. Gabby is not only a volleyball legend, but an inspirational health and wellness leader, podcast host, corporate speaker, New York Times bestselling author, wife, and mother. Today, we'll be diving into Gabby's insights on how to live a life by design, building self-confidence, and leveraging strengths to create a purposeful and fulfilling life. Without further ado, welcome, Gabby.
Thank you for having me. I
Very,
always love
very
like the
much.
lists, that's just if you live long enough, you get lists after your name. That's all.
Well, the list kind of goes into the first question because I mentioned so many titles, occupations, and in my world, my mom would say, you wear a lot of different hats. Um, the ones I didn't mention: entrepreneur, TV host, actress, model. Which are you most proud of? But also, which would surprise your younger self the most?
Oh, that's a good question. I can say that when I started competing, I played in college and then at 22 when I turned professional. I don't know that family was such sort of a idea or pursuit for me. And I actually met my husband pretty young at 25. But maybe it's a simple and boring answer. Being able to stay in a long relationship and try to, and find ways to have it thrive and us as individuals thrive. So collectively and separately.
Mm.
And then being able to kind of dance as a parent because you'll hear people say this all the time. They don't give you a manual and every person is different. And I think we have this idea because it's probably the only reason you procreate that like, oh, I'm going to do it right because I'm going to do this, this, and this, and then it's going to be smooth sailing. And then you get into it and you go, oh yeah, okay, this is what it is. And so it's a beautiful education. It's an ass kicker. So I would say probably that being able to kind of stand at least so far and weather, a relationship and being a parent and not things always going so smoothly and trying to figure out, okay, how do I navigate this? I would, I would feel really good because the rest is a little, you're not quite as vested and it's a little shinier, right? And it's not stuff that people are like, wow, great parenting or, way to communicate. So this is the stuff that's not sexy, but it's the stuff that is difficult, takes self-control and constant willingness to take a look at yourself.
Mm, mm. Take me back, I mean, if you would, to young Gabby, your journey, and honestly, like, what about it's kind of important for me and everyone listening to understand you a bit more.
One thing I've learned as I've lived a few more years is that pretty much almost everyone has a story,
Mm.
right? We all think that, oh, I went through hard times. And what you realize is pretty much everyone has. And so if I took the obvious things, my father died when I was 5. My mom sort of left me with a very nice couple from age 2 to 7. I had sort of a little bit of a tumultuous sort of foundation, but then I had really great peripheral adults and coaches step in and were there for me as mentors along the way. Um, and then as you get older, you realize I'm grateful for that. And it is also time to move on from that. And it's also learning that all of that happened to help me become the person or the tool that I needed to become in my life. Because I think a lot of us can get stuck in, well, my mom's like this or this happened to me. And I think we have to find the ways to really move through it. And I read once that at 27, we sort of have to be totally responsible and accountable. Not like, well, I do this because this happened. Short of like heavy trauma, right? So I think to know me is to know that all of the difficult things really were a huge asset for me. And more than half of my success is because I developed skills and tools very young that have helped me all along the way. And I'm still trying to offload some of the, the less than better traits that don't serve the reality I live in now.
Mm. When you were young, I mean, you just mentioned some of the difficulties, obviously family members passing away, and there was some turbulence. Was there a clear vision of where you wanted to go, or was the vision more so what you didn't want in your life? And because that's something that I'm finding so important to me right
Mm,
now is, yeah, there's things I want to accomplish. I have this, somewhat of a tainted vision that I want to live, but I know exactly what I don't want to become. I know exactly the person I don't want to be. I know who I don't want in my circle, and I think that's becoming more clear, more
mm.
so than the actual vision.
That's a really important point because sometimes what we want is not always so clear to us. And constantly, day by day, we'll see things that we think, oh, you know what? I don't want that. So I think that's a really smart comment. I certainly grew up in situations where I knew what I didn't want. I definitely was not on a path to any success. The fact that I grew up in the Virgin Islands. My junior year, I was moved to Florida. I was 15 and 6'3". Okay, so I walk into this school and they go, "You're going to play volleyball and basketball." I dabbled a little bit in volleyball. Within 18 months, so from when I entered in my junior year to then when I was graduating, I was offered many basketball and volleyball scholarships, completely by surprise. I was a different person. I transformed as a person in so many ways in that short period of time. And I went to college on a scholarship, not in the plan, zero.
Mm,
Same thing for playing professionally. Went to college, had a really good experience in college, had a very good coach, which, as you know, can really make or break sometimes your
yep.
relationship with your sport and your
Yep.
experience. And then sort of fell into playing professionally. And so, there's an interesting thing that I would say to people, which is sometimes the outside world is all telling us, like, oh, you should play club and you should do this and you should go to that college. And that's all fine and dandy. But I also think all of us really do have, there is something for us. It's laid out. And I actually don't think we can be blocked from it, but we just have to follow. So when we get an instinct, we have to do it, even if we're scared. But if we're like, hey, I kind of like this feels good. That mentor, I want to ask them to help me. I'm intimidated to do it, but I really feel it. Is that we sort of can also trip into our path that really reflects who we are. And that for me is success, right? Not like I went to Stanford and then I played on the US team and then I did this. By the way, that was of no interest to me. I did it very differently. But success is my life reflects who I am. And
And the
that's what we could all want. And using those
yeah.
indicators of what we don't want is really, really important because it's sort of like nature or God's cues of like, hey, this is what that looks like if you do this.
Yeah. And then once you identify that, then it's just kind of piecemeal it, what I don't need in my life, who the people I don't, want to associate myself with, the influences. And then I feel like over time it just comes naturally that the vision and everything that you do want in your life just falls into place. But it's making the conscious decision, and it's having, I guess, that maybe call it emotional awareness or emotional maturity, that bandwidth to actually start asking yourselves in a very authentic way where you want to go or what you don't want in your life.
And I want to sort of create extra space for your kind of age group because I grew up without a cell phone. So I lived in a much more quiet world. You guys have to fend off constant inundation all the time of what you're supposed to do and where you're supposed to go and what's cool and what you're supposed to look like and all this stuff. And so I think it's the space, the quiet, where you get to ask yourself, no, really, what makes me feel good? Because it might be a lot more quiet, or it may not be as cool, or whatever, things, labels we put on things. But to have longevity in anything we're doing and to keep, because people go, oh, you reinvent yourself. No, you don't. We just change as people, and then your life continues to reflect that. So if you can get into that rhythm early in life and trust that, even though it's scary, it's unknown. And by the way, it's hard. And everything is hard, even when the path's laid out for you. So pick, your hard, and really trust that. And occasionally it's really good to ask people that you trust, that are rooting for you, hey, what do you think? And then finally with that is to to conduct yourself, your words, your thoughts, where you spend your time and energy, as if you are the person that you're saying you want to be, and that wants to have a certain kind of life. So that's on us, right? That's that accountability part that has to be, like you said, that emotional awareness that like you there's no letting yourself off the hook or excuses. It just, and life's unfair sometimes.
I know it really is. But I mean, you go from high school to college to professional. I mean, life's moving 100 miles an hour. What was the dream at that point?
I was so interested in safety and stability because I didn't have it growing up, that in a certain way I was a very simple person.
Mm,
By the time I signed a Nike deal, I think I was 22 or 23. And like I completely, I mean, I bought a house when I was in college, apartment, a townhouse at Florida State when I was 19, because I was working also. And I was really looking for stability and to be a part of something. And I had done that, right? Like, you're on a team, then you're on another team. I could pay my bills. And then it becomes like a different thing. It becomes, hey, how do I contribute in the way that I want to, that I feel like is that it's, as far as like my dreams or my life's moving fast.
yeah.
I think I really like the structure. I like the grind. I'm a grinder for sure.
Yep.
Um, but I don't know that, because I was raised on an island, I was never taught like, oh, you have to do something and you have to, quote, be someone. That was never there was no expectation. So it was really a total exploration. Now, I will not BS you and say I'm not strategic. There comes points where you enter into a domain of work, you start to understand what's going on, and you go, okay, what is my strategy in this? But I don't think it's so great. It wasn't for me anyway, a good idea to enter with some big strategy before I got into the thing I was doing.
Mm.
Because I think it was about understanding. And then it was going, well, how does this work? How do I play this particular board the right way? So first is the exploration, then is the strategy after that. But as far as like big dreams or whatever, I don't know that I had that.
You said you were 6 foot 15 years old, and
6'3",
I know six. Okay, even taller. But I know many
even.
stories. My sister, who's this, she's superwoman in my life, but she was 5'10", obviously taller than a lot of the kids in her age, especially men, and that can
Mm-hmm.
have a damaging effect on your mental health. Just being taller and bigger than everyone, and then you go to signing with Nike at 22, whatever. Did that give you more validation, or what? How were you mentally, and just like that body image, that self confidence piece? Because it's such a prevalent thing in today's society, especially with social media pressing that
Yeah.
that knob.
I think what happened is, because I lived in the islands, everyone's sort of a mixed group. Of course, I mean, I would, everywhere you go, people would stare at you. But then what happened is I started playing volleyball and working in New York modeling, and I was really in the pretty sharp end of the stick in fashion. So I would work with the
Mm.
most well known girls that there were. So what happened was this: I've told the story before. I would be at lunch with a girl who's could be on the cover of Vogue, the most beautiful. Like, you see these women and you think they're not even real. They're so beautiful. You're just like, who has all of that, right? And you'd see insecurity, you'd see kind of like a self-consciousness. So I can remember at 18 being like, oh, wait a second, being perfectly, again, quotes, beautiful is definitely not the answer. Then I would fly and go to Tallahassee and be at a sweaty gym with some girls. Maybe their butts are a little bigger and maybe someone's got a couple pimples. And these are robust women and confident and fun and, with a high life force. And you go, oh, okay, a skill, a craft, the ability to work hard, to be in possession of your own self esteem seems a lot more powerful.
Mm.
So I think I learned that lesson. It was actually a really weird juxtaposition, kind of really visual. And I was like, oh, okay. And then what happens is you realize you can't live and die on what people think of you or how you look, that you've got to develop yourself as a person. And by the way, if you try to make everybody happy, they're not going to be anyway. Not everybody's going to like you. You're not going to be everybody's cup of tea. So like do your thing and make yourself happy, and hopefully you have some people around you that are like, "You know what? I love you and respect you, and like you're we've got this," and build those real relationships versus like, "Do you like me? Do you think I look pretty? I know I'm bigger than everybody." And the other part of that is like I was so kind of weirdly big that it was like you have to make a decision right now. Am I going to die with this, or am I just going to roll? And I just remember thinking, I'm not here to torture myself. Like, let's
Yeah.
just roll.
Yeah. All right, let's go living a life by design. And I know it's kind of a
Okay.
loaded question, but what does that mean to you, and
Hmm.
how have you applied it to your life?
Well, I've applied it a lot once I got into sort of my adult years, because then it's like you sort of get your bearings about who you are. So first, I would say just from a business side, how is how do you have the ability that most things you're doing and spending your time on are a true reflection of who you are.
Mm.
Not 100%. It's impossible, right? You're sometimes bending and flexing, but you really have to hold the line. So if we say by design, you also have to understand what are your bumpers, what are your guardrails, what are your, it can't be at all costs. Because if you're a person who doesn't have some kind of guardrails or bumpers, you'll get lost. You won't be able to design anything. So it's sort of really understanding like who am I and what would I be willing to represent. And that even came to like endorsements and things like that. It was like if I wouldn't use it, I wouldn't endorse it. Would the money have been great? Sure. But you just have to kind of adhere to that. And my husband always says, saying no when you can't is when it's important. And so I've just constantly architect, whether it's the businesses that we're in or doing or have created, um, or products or whatever, or where I'm spending my time, it's designed around these values and these bumpers. And you realize that when it's not happening, or it's a slow time or a hard time, that you have that to go back to understand that it starts there, that that's actually where success starts, that no matter what, I could feel good about that. And once you do it a few times, I've had businesses that have failed, I've had very successful businesses, things that have gone through challenges, whatever. You get the faith in that design, in
Mm.
that, hey, I'm willing to work hard, I'm willing to adapt, I won't compromise the things that I know are against my real values. It's okay. Like we always joke, like we have stuff to sell, fine, and you'd be willing, and not to worry about doing things only for attention, because that's a dangerous game. So do your work. Sometimes it's popular, sometimes it's not. You go in, you go out. It's all part of it.
I'm so happy you touched on values, because there's a doctor by the name of Dr. DeMartini who talks about living a life based on your values. And it's not, Christian Dyer, I value accountability and honesty and hard work. It's more so I really, really value family. I really, really value playing sports. I value health, and winning. And that's why I play rugby. That's why I call a mom or dad every single day. That's why I do the things that I do. But when you can, I guess, schedule and coordinate your life based on those values, that's for me the answer to how do you seem so happy? How is your life seem so filled and purposeful? It's, well, I do stuff every day that genuinely brings me value. It's not living outside of that. And I can remember when I was young, I was doing stuff, whether it be attention, or maybe I was doing internships or side jobs that I only did because there was a paycheck attached to them.
Mm-hmm.
But I can guarantee you, me showing up from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. was like me pulling my hair out every single minute I was there. And I'd rather not earn the money, but do stuff that I genuinely love. And that's when I'll be like, I'm happy. I'm
Yeah.
enjoying what I'm doing.
And I think when you're willing to stand that for that, your life will reflect that. A lot of times,
Yeah.
again, I live with somebody who everyone thinks like plays for a living, right? Laird, because fun and being out in nature is a a value, an importance to him. Like for me, sometimes he's like, are you going to sit at your desk and answer emails and get all this done? What are we doing with our life? For him, like going in nature and seeing some bird do, an albatross fly and catching a wave and being in Mother Nature has a value. So his life Doesn't mean it's not at a cost. It doesn't mean there's not a tremendous amount of hard work that goes into it. But then your life sort of opens up because people go, oh, look at you, you get to have fun and do all this stuff. It's like, oh, okay. But it's understanding that and having it. And the other thing is the world tells us, hey, you have to have a lot of zeros, you have to have a title, and you have to have, you have to be, sort of have this job or something to be successful. But if you can really dig in there and figure out, like you said, okay, being competitive or my family or what have you, then you will be successful because what is success?
It's so subjective.
Yeah. And I can tell you, and we've all met people, it isn't the zeros or the big fancy job.
Yeah.
And by the way, none of that is sustainable anyway. It's a pursuit that you're never going to get there. So getting that sense of accomplishment or sense of well-being or richness of life or relationships, like there's nothing better.
Yeah. Yeah. How have you managed to have so many like unique titles? I mean, going athlete to model to businesswoman. I mean, there's just so many, and there's a lot of people who have played professional sports, played national team sports, who have done some of the things you've done, but haven't been able to continue growing or more titles. So why you? Like, what's different?
I'll be honest, I think there's a couple things. One, I'm very fortunate. Let's just call it, because everyone can be like, I did this. There's also some great fortune that gets into certain things, and I don't, it's not always to be understood. But I think because I was so hyper vigilant as a kid, because I had to be, I think I have always, including when I played professionally, been here and now and able to work very hard here and now and done the 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, and looked a little bit ahead at the landscape and thought, what would be interesting? Where do I think I would like my life to go? And it doesn't mean I knew how to do that. It just means I was asking the questions. And
Yeah.
what I will say to any athlete, especially if they're active, ask for help while you're playing, because for whatever reason, people want to help you when you're playing. You don't want to get spit out of your sport and be standing there and be like, hey guys, I'm ready. Because it's sort of like desperation. It never smells good. So if you're in this idea, in this sort of like hormonal state and this whole state when you're at apex playing, start looking around and be like, what else would I like to do? And start asking for help then, because then those doors just open a little easier. Don't emulate. Don't look at other athletes and go, they're doing that. That really seems to work. Don't do that, because it just, that's where you have to really dig in and be like, what would the next part of my life look like, at least for the next 10 years? What skill sets do I have that I feel really are pretty strong that I want to express? And what does that look like in the world outside of, let's say, sport?
Mm.
And then I think the answers come. And sometimes there's huge failures. I can tell you a list of failures that I have all the time.
Unfortunately, when you're playing sports, the title behind your name carries a lot of weight. And that title is very, very quick to leave when you hang the cleats up, or that's just my world. But I've heard recently from both my own experience doing so much stuff outside of playing rugby and from other individuals, buddies who are in the NBA, UFC, NFL, where sometimes coaches or owners or whoever it may be, they don't like the idea of their athlete having other things going on, because it almost for them feels like they're not 100% bought in. And I
Mm-hmm.
sit there and I scratch my head and I'm like, what the heck are you guys thinking? Just because I have something else going on doesn't mean I don't love the sport, doesn't mean I'm not going to give everything I have into it. At the other end of the spectrum, when you're playing sport, you're a pawn, because it's always created for the business first. Yeah, and
Well, I will
I'm
say
happy you
this
brought that
too.
up.
I played on a small platform sport. So are you. So let's say I'm a guy in the NBA and I have the big contract. I can afford to only do that. Most
Sure.
athletes have to do the hustle.
Mm,
So I think I can appreciate what owners think, but at the end of the day, they're not going to be there for you when you're done. So there's only a
mm.
handful of sports where they can get away with that. And that's just the
Yep.
way it is.
Yeah, yeah, and for the athletes listening, I can tell you from my like personal experience, the minute I started exploring other parts of my life, the better my performance on the field came. I was happier. My identity wasn't rooted in sport. If I had a bad game, that didn't mean I was going to have a bad week, because I have so many other things that I actually look forward to. And I think it just comes back to what we were talking about, living a life based on your values.
Yeah. And that's you said a very important word, which is identity. I've said this before. We are all of those things and none of those things.
Yeah.
And, there's even times like I would like to transcend my gender and my age and just sort of be the spirit that I am. And so I think it's not being like, I'm Gabby, the volleyball player, or it's like, great, I'm all those things, whatever that means. But at some point, how am I just that spirit that is curious and moving and interested and, following that and cultivating that and being okay with oh, you used to do that, or oh, what have you been up to, or oh, you're so tall, did you play a sport? Sometimes I go places, people recognize me. Sometimes I'm a lady in the grocery store. Like, who cares? Who cares? And so I think if we can do that sooner than later, especially if we're kicking ass in sport, then we're liberated pretty powerfully from this identity.
But then how do we do that? Does it come from having the confidence to detach? Yeah.
We have to understand that if we getting to do this sport, we're so very fortunate,
Mm.
and that it's an incredible way to express yourself. To be able to do anything at a really high, precise level is such a beautiful thing. So to enjoy it and take it in, but to also understand that our value is not wrapped up in that. And that's why I talk about cultivating a real life, real relationships, friends that have your back, but will also say, hey, you're acting like a knucklehead, like all of it. And that your interests, your mind, your intellect, your intelligence, your spiritual sort of self is bigger than the athlete. That you keep putting chips into those development, so that what you're contributing into the world and how you're expressing yourself and connecting with people transcends like kicking or hitting a ball or throwing a ball or anything.
I mentioned Nate Ebner before this, when he and I were talking about his 10 years in the league, and we talked about the best years he's had. So he had 3 years in a row of being in the Pro Bowl. And he told me it was at the point when he left the NFL, went to Rio Olympics for rugby, came back, but he realized he kind of had this fuck it attitude, and he realized that he didn't need football anymore in his life. He loves it and he'll play, but he didn't need it. So basically what he realized is he wasn't just an NFL player. He wasn't just a baller. He was a lot more than that. And once he detached his identity, his happiness, maybe his confidence and well-being from NFL, that's when his performance just went to another level.
Yeah.
And I think that can resonate with everyone listening, regardless if you're an athlete. Like, you aren't your title.
You're not. And
And
sometimes those times when we're feeling down, let's say, or it's just not happening. This has been a very hard time for people, non-athletic people, all people, COVID, whatever. It's like, oh, this is an incubation time. So this is time for you then to, what can you be in charge of? Okay, I can eat better. Oh, I can train. I can take care of myself. I can call people I love. I can learn. So it's also when you're in those down times, being really sort of responsible and resilient and saying, you know what, I'm going to stand up here and I'm going to bust my ass and keep doing, because then that's how you create the next. And by the way, fear never is sexy. So
mm,
if we're like, I have to do this and do this so well, that's usually not the most powerful tool. I think it can get us there from young into the thing. Like for me personally, I think a chip on your shoulder, or for me, I was scared, so I had to really make something happen. That is a powerful tool to get there. But once you're kind of there, it's like, okay, we've got to find other fuel to sort of really open this up. And it can be really important. Going back to identity, Laird always says, hey, listen, and this is somebody who like is a surfer, but he says, no, I'm Laird. And one of the things I do is I surf.
mm.
And this is somebody who's dedicated an entire life, more years than any of us would ever do a sport. And yet, even in there is a separation of, no, I'm me, and this is something I do.
I used to be so driven by the fear of failure. That was me growing up, whether it be the fear of what other people are going to think if I had a good or bad game. I always told people I wanted to go to some university, and I was fearful that if I didn't play well enough, I wasn't going to get into the university that I wanted to go to, and then I wasn't going to be able to tell people, yes, I got in. All that fear
Mm.
drove me to say no to a lot of parties on the weekends. I was in Friday nights. I was at the gym. I was always working harder, doing extras like left, right, and center. And then I got out on my own. I failed a couple times. I tore my ACL. I had to go figure out what else in life that I love. Worked with a sports psychologist, and it's so funny how the things that I'm driven by now really aren't around failure. It's more about taking this to the highest level I can. I love winning, but it's like, how can I inspire someone else to go chase their dream? How can I inspire someone through what I'm doing right now to
Yeah.
become their best self? And I think that whole change in perspective, being able to reframe that, almost liberated like my life and my mentality.
Yeah. And you added something in there that we don't give enough value to because it sounds like rhetoric, but the notion of service in any way. And I don't mean it like I'm doing service because, we all want to, knock someone in the head when they act like that. But when there's elements of service in some of the stuff we're doing day in and day out, and not as a cause of like, today I do service, but it's just kind of how you're living.
Yep.
That's when we're really getting to the good stuff. No matter who we are, we could be at the top of the mountain and you're win the Super Bowl, whatever. It's when you have some of that service in your life woven into your day-to-day life that then I think we start to feel really, there's a great philosopher, Alfred Adler, and he talks all about, there's a book called The Fear to be Disliked. And he really, but basically gets down to, it's like, if you really want to feel happiness or joy, you got to be of service.
Your mission, from what I've gathered, is to encourage people to become their best selves. Why and where'd this come from?
I don't know. So here's what I know. People will take from you what they need. So all I can do is try to be my best, most honest self and represent for myself something that tends towards the positive, right? And just hope that I'm contributing to the world that I live in, and maybe that people will see something and think, oh, you know what, that thing that I see there, that motivates me in this way. Because one thing I've learned is you cannot think that you're going to understand what you represent to somebody. It's not realistic. So it's more about keep your head down, and the notion of also, it's also kind of none of my business, right? So like I have a friend, Byron Katie, and she says, what you think of me is none of my business. And so I think there's also a part of that of like, hey, do your work and then trust the rest.
There's a quote by Rory Vaden, and he goes, "You're most powerfully positioned to serve the person you once were."
Mm.
And so there's probably some level to that with you, where your whole upbringing, your experiences, in the Virgin Islands, playing sport, everything, like, it's led you to this place where you're able to give back to someone maybe in the same position, similar circumstances, whatever it may be. Like, your audience will find you organically.
They do. And that's the other thing, is what's interesting for me is like how my audience has changed so very much over the years. I think it's fascinating that you, at a 25-year-old male, why you're calling me and asking me to talk, no, you know what I mean? Like, I find that interesting, and I'm like, okay, sure. But I don't think about it. But it's another thing that I think is just really important is this notion of constant accountability and constant grace, right? We can't just hammer ourselves all day long. I think it's showing yourself grace and going, great, now what are we doing?
Yeah, no, I mean, and I when I originally reached out, it was after I listened to you and Christian McCaffrey,
Mm.
and that was a couple weeks after I heard that quote, and I realized, growing up, I would always be on YouTube searching like literally day in the life of Christian McCaffrey, or what does Tom Brady eat in a day? All these superstars, trying to emulate kind of like what their life looks like, trying to see what bits that I can take and implement to my life to maybe get me one step closer to my goal.
Yeah.
And then I got to a point where there was nothing left on YouTube. I've seen it all. And then I got to a point where I realized my network is so vast. I have such a unique network with just filled with really, really high level people. And I was like, why can't I start creating, whether that be that content or having these conversations, to start giving back some of the information that I once really, really, really wish I had.
Mm.
And that's when I realized, as much as life's about me, it's a hell of a lot more than about the things I can give back to everyone else.
Well, and the fun part is you can use the conversations for your own learning. That's what I do. I always say, like,
Mm-hmm.
selfishly, I'm just trying to do forced learning because sometimes I feel lazy or I'm overwhelmed with work and kids and my own training. And then I'm like, oh, forced learning. I have somebody I'm talking to tomorrow and they've written 7 books and I better get into it. And the other thing I want to remind your audience, and I've said this a few times, is we all have low cards and high cards, right? Like in my deck when I was growing up, maybe I had a few low cards, but I was 6'3". I looked a certain way. I was athletic. I had some badass adults. So I had some high cards. I had some aces and some kings. And I always want to remind people, you want to work on your low cards, but you want to play your high cards and don't cry and go like, look at, I have so many 2s and 3s. It's like, yeah, you and everybody else play the high cards, you
Right.
know?
We're, from our perspective, sports, you're not selected for what you're bad at. You're selected because you can do something really well.
Right.
And so same thing in life, right? Like, we're always looking at trying to figure out what's going wrong, or our weakness, and start attacking those rather than doubling down on what we're already good at. And I think it's like, you can't chase only what you love, because I really love golf, but I promise you I'll never be on the PGA.
Right.
But I also can't chase just the things that maybe I could do that are going to give me a shiny paycheck. It's like finding that middle ground of
Yeah.
passion, purpose, but also strengths. And I think it's a tough thing to do. Can you shed any light on that?
It's very tough. And, again, this comes back to straight honesty. So, for example, you might have a job that sort of fits within your values that we talked about, but it, like the edges of the values are going, kind of smushing out a little. But it's a paycheck and it's sort of like, could I answer for that? And and it's having those constant calibrations and knowing when it's too far and you go, I can't answer for that. I have to say no versus, you know what? I can answer for that. And I'm taking this paycheck because what that does is it gives me space to do this other work that I'm really trying to do. And, but again, you have to have limits and bumpers and you have to be willing to say no when you really don't want to or really can't. And as cheesy as this sounds, it always works out. It really does. Like if you develop that relationship, whatever you want to call it, do you want to call it faith, belief, whatever it is, we get it right when we need it, never as quick as we want it. And sometimes you feel like your whole thing dangling from a string, but whatever it is, whoever it is, opportunity, it always shows up when we really need it. So this idea of like the universe is conspiring for us, I really believe that. But it is helpful also occasionally to have someone. That's the other
Yeah.
thing is like, do you have a friend or a parent or a sibling that you can be like, yo, this is so hard right now and I'm stressing out and I'm losing sleep over it and I'm worried and I'm scared. And just to offload that and then, kind of get back to business or, or do you need to pivot or make adjustments or what have you? But to sort of deep up and underneath go, what's the worst thing that's going to happen really? And that notion too of like, I'm actually good right now. That's the other thing I've had to learn. We
Mm.
spend so much time, my friend calls it past futuring, that if we look right now, most of us, we're okay.
And a lot of that comes with having the confidence that maybe one day it will work out. But to develop that sense of confidence it's tough. I didn't
Yeah.
always have it. One thing that I found is like, confidence just comes from doing what I say I'm going to do. And so for you, where has your sense of confidence come from? And maybe give us an example of a time where you weren't confident, and how you kind of manage that situation and learn from it.
I think doing businesses because there's so many elements, and then you invest a lot of time and maybe even resources to something. So I think there's a lot of examples, even in the last 5 years, of businesses that we have a Laird Superfood, which is a food company. We have a fitness business, XPT. We have another apparel company, all these things. where you just go, man, is it like, is there ever going to be a time that this is easy? Like it does, and you look around, you see people killing it over here or doing this, and you think, well, I'd like some of that ease, where's the grease? Like, how do they have that grease in their life? And I realized, like, oh, this is my path, unique to me. I'm not going to make it harder than it needs to be, but I've been here enough. I've fallen on my face. I've survived it. And like I said, it's when I really go to, okay, what truly is the worst case scenario? Then I just go, great. We can handle that. Because when you get to the
Yeah.
place of like, nobody's sick and we'll be able to eat at some, like, no matter what, everything else is sort of child's play.
When I tore my ACL, a former teammate of mine who was paralyzed in a rugby game called me and said it could be a lot worse. And I'm like, oh, wow. Yeah. Because I thought the weight of the world was on me.
Mm,
And you know what? A lot of athletes blow out their knees, and it's a
mm,
tough one. No, it
it is.
really is. Mentally more so than physically. But when you remind yourself, probably could be worse. Mom
It,
and dad are okay.
yeah,
Brother and sister are healthy and happy. It's like
yeah,
that perspective
yeah.
is a tough one to really own, but it's a vital one.
And I hate to say it, some people might get there more naturally. That's also an exercise in discipline, right? It's like training when you don't want to, not shoving that whole beautiful New York style pizza in your face when you really want it. This also is sort of an emotional kind of discipline that you have to be like, hey, I'm feeling this. So you got to offload that. And then I'm going to get my mind focused on these better parts of this perspective and work at that. It doesn't mean it's not a constant. It's a practice. And that's the other thing I've learned about all of this. You can have all the answers, all the information, you can know exactly what to do. If you don't have a system in place and a practice in place to follow along to do it, you can't be successful no matter how disciplined you are and how knowledgeable you are. And so I think for me it's always about the nuts and bolts and the foundation. And that gets, you're like, really, I'm still doing this. It would be like, I played volleyball once when I was 40. And I think the guy, my coach at the time, because I was coming back and playing a little bit at a higher level, and he said something about bending my knees. Okay, you know how much? I don't know what the fundamental talk is in rugby, but it's like, yo, are you serious? We're still talking about bending my knees? Yeah, we are. So I think it's like life. It's getting that practice, it's getting redoing fundamentals and the basics over and over and over to ad nauseum, because that's part of the deal.
Talk to me about taking risks and the impact going down paths that may seem daunting or the end
Mm,
goal is blurry, but
yeah.
you look back and it might have been the best decision you've ever made.
I, be- I believe this is where we calculate with our mind sort of a reasonableness about it. Like once we evaluate and go, this feels like a reasonable risk, then we have to go right back into our instinct and really tap into that and be like, is this what needs to happen? So it's this weird combination where maybe the instinct tells you first, like, hey, do this, and then get your brain engaged and kind of assess and then go back into the instinct and say, where is this coming from? Is it coming from fear? Is it coming from ego? Where is this coming from? Is this a real calling? And then go for it. Like, but
Mm.
go for it not blindly, and go for it with, as you take two steps and you gather more information, look up, assess what's your new strategy. So constantly doing both of those things all of the time.
And often, I mean, you said that a lot of or you ran into a lot of fortune, or you were fortunate in all these career paths and titles, but you're you also create your own luck. You put yourselves in situations where doors may open or you may meet the right person, but it's just that decision to actually go for it. And I found that so useful in my life recently. Is like, I don't know if it's going to work out. There's a lot of risks I'm taking. I'm putting myself out there, whether it be on social media or getting into new ventures, branding, content creation. But even though it's not perfect right now,
Mm.
it's opening doors left and right that I never thought would have opened.
Yeah, because if it's genuinely, your reasons for doing it are genuine, if people are doing things, that's another thing to really watch out for. You're going to see that there will be people who do things like they kind of start to see a recipe or a formula and they go, oh, I know how to get attention. And they might do kind of the same thing you do. And you'll trot along in your sort of way. And you'll be like, well, why are they getting so much attention? It's like, No, just do it your way, and believe in that process, because what you're doing is you're building. And I personally, I have been in a public job since 1988, since I was
Mm.
18 years old. And so my goal was never to be like, oh, I want everyone to, I want to be super well known. I just wanted to do really good work, and I wanted to keep generating new opportunities for myself. That was it. And work with high quality people. So we're whatever, 35 years later. And it's because it's like, just stay true to the way you think you should be doing it. Don't do weird stuff to get attention, and, trust that. And I believe if your real reasons are solid, you can, work and do things forever.
Yeah. All right, getting into our last segment, and we could do honestly an entire episode on health and wellness and your
Oh,
approach to all of that stuff.
okay.
Seriously, can you give me just like what's your approach to nutrition? I know
Mhm.
you and Laird live this really, really healthy lifestyle, and it's not just what you put into your body; it's a lifestyle. You know, it's
Mhm.
what you do in the morning, what you do before bed. It's all encompassing.
Yeah. So, I mean, listen, if you want to talk about nutrition, it's kind of like the basic plants and animals. We eat highly, sourced, high quality animal protein. If I have it, a lot of it gets sent in, like Force of Nature. His friend sent moose from Alaska. Like, to the best of our ability, it's not always possible. And vegetables, I'm not
Yeah.
afraid of carbohydrates. I don't eat a bunch of processed foods necessarily. But again, I think if we get too precious about anything, it's dangerous. So if we're traveling or doing something, then I do that. So I try not to put any stress around it, but that's just my practice. And basic supplementation, nothing crazy. And what I will say at my age, where I kind of have been around a lot of high performing people a lot, then you start to go, hey, cool. Like, let's talk about, heart rate variability and everything everybody likes to measure. That's cool. And I think I'm pretty fit. But what I have come to really covet and appreciate is a practice of sort of self health, emotional health. When I talk, when I listen, how I deal with my children, how I am in my partnership, my thoughts, my words. It's like, if you really want to talk about wellness, people think I go to the gym, I bang iron. It's like, yeah, yeah, yeah. That's child's play. That's for amateurs. I don't care what your 40 is. What kind of also emotional kind of discipline and control do you have that you can do that and not do all of this with a bunch of stress around it. So that's kind of also where I'm at with it. Like, you want to talk to me about high performance, it's people who can put all that together. Then you have my attention. I've seen it all. I have a friend, Chris Duffin. He squatted and deadlifted over 1,000 pounds for multiple reps. It's like, okay, great. Show me a guy stronger than that. Don't know him. It's like, I've seen fast guys. But can you stay curious? Can you be kind? Can you allow someone else to go in front of you? Can you not overreact when you really want to? When you start getting into that stuff, I think that's the really interesting parts of performance. I use the food and the exercise and going to bed early as an opportunity to try to do the other stuff easier.
And there's also a component, I think people, especially we talked about social media, right? Whoever the most ripped is, whoever the strongest is, oh, they're the healthiest or whatever it may be. But it's like, they're probably couch potatoes because they're starving themselves, right? Of some of the
Yeah.
nutrition. Or like when I think about the healthy people, it's like, who's the most energetic? Who
Yeah.
wakes up every day feeling actually good?
Yeah.
And it's that sort of stuff that I'm learning about, all these other lifestyle factors that can contribute to that
Mm.
more so than just what I do in the gym and what I eat. It's like, I love doing cold therapy now. I
Yeah.
love it. I love getting in the sauna. There's so many other things that don't require, vast amount of energy expenditure or thought. It's more so just that decision to get them done on a daily basis.
Yeah. I mean, listen, if you want to get nitty gritty, we do a very innovative pool training at my house. Deep water, ballistic training with dumbbells in deep water, hypoxic cardiovascular workouts with dumbbells, working on the horizontal plane. We do tons of heat and ice, breathing practices, trying to increase, CO2 capacity, things like that. That's what I mean. Like we can get granular, like the next person. And I will say this for people training, to your point, if you can participate, that's one of the philosophies at XPT. If you can participate in your recovery, this is everything. Because people will say, oh, I have a day off. A day off doesn't mean do anything. It means, can you now participate in your recovery? So using heat, using ice, and things like breathing. Breathing is a really interesting tool because because it's free and you can do it anywhere. It sort of gets highly overlooked. Like people are like, oh yeah. It's like, no, it's really powerful and you can really impact your health in such a positive way and your performance if you really start to understand how to use breath and whether it's to upregulate or downregulate. So I think there is a lot to that. If you probably have those kinds of people. I really like Patrick McCune for breathing. I actually really like our XPT app because it's like, what do you want to do? And there's science behind it. And so I love those kinds of things. And I would really encourage people to figure that out. But, then after all of that, we still have to show up as human beings. So that's, the other side of it.
Yeah. Now, final question, Gabby. What is the best advice you've ever received?
Well, I think, listen, obviously, especially for females, don't take it personal. Don't take anything personal. We live by the stories in our head and it's such a drag. So I would say definitely don't take it personal. And, we cannot please everyone all of the time. And so if you can get real clear with yourself and you feel good about your whys, then go for that because then your life is yours and it's worth living and the people who love you will support you and also like we take ourselves so serious. Like I'm one of like 7+ billion people like nobody cares about me, what I think, if I'm having a good day, a bad day, what do I look like? Nobody really cares. So, kind of lighten up a little.
Well said. Well, this was epic. I mean, I know you've probably haven't been on another 25-year-old male's podcast before, but for you to be here and give me your time, I'm really grateful.
Well, you asked really thoughtful questions. And so my thing is, I can learn from everyone around me. And so I'm never going to shut things down because it comes in a package that like is different. Like the fact that you'd have me here, right? It's the same thing. So that's where I try to live because we're all just people.
Yeah. Where can people follow you? What can they expect from you in the future? And how can we support you and your mission?
I just had a thought like I got arrested drunk driving. I mean, I don't drink, so I thought that was funny. Like if I could really make a hard left, I Gabby Reece with a C, GABBYREECE. So Instagram. My podcast is the Gabby Reece Show. Very original title. I talk to a lot of people in the health and wellness, self-care space, scientists, doctors, and just people that sort of I go, how are you doing that? And that's it.
That's incredible. Well, I'll leave you to that.
Yeah.
I wish you all the best.
Thank
Hopefully,
you.
Stay in contact in the future and go well.
Thank you. You
Keep
too.
doing what you're doing. Thank you so much. All right, Gabby.
Thanks. Aloha.